Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Okay, good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. It is 9:02 a.m. The session is set to go until 10 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. This morning we're having issues with our live stream, but this meeting is being recorded and will be posted onto our Thurston County YouTube channel later on. The topic, I'll do introductions. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board, joining you via Zoom, and we'll be joining you in the boardroom shortly. Also in the boardroom, we have Vice Chair Ty Menser, as well as Commissioner Gary Edwards, County Manager Ramiro Chavez, and as well as other staff. And we'll be discussing the Lake Management District, LMD, administrative rules briefing. And so with that, who am I passing this to?
I will, Madam Chair, I will just give a little bit of an introduction.
Perfect.
And this is related to the Lake Management District admin rules. As you're well aware of the history, maybe over a year ago now, staff developed an admin rules that created some concerns from the LMDs, which a lot of conversation on that. They provided some perspective as to how the admin rules should be implemented. They provided their own version. The board asked staff, specifically myself, to see if there's an opportunity to take the initial version of the what staff proposed and see what comments we can incorporate from the Lake Management District version of the admin rules. We did that, and this is what you see in your packet today on the red line, blue line version. This was presented to you back a couple months ago, and at that point the board asked that you needed a little more time than just during agenda setting as I introduced this new version. So since this version has not changed, this because I believe the board wanted to have a conversation among yourselves whether this blended version is something you'd like to proceed or not. At this point, the staff is not looking for a specific decision. I believe the staff is looking for direction at this point from the board. What will be the next steps? So that's a little bit of the history as to how we're here. And again, the version that you see in the red line, blue line version has not changed from the last time we presented to you. Because at that time, again, the board requested to schedule an hour briefing for you to have the opportunity to have enough time to discuss this issue. At this point, I'll pass it on to Tim to provide additional perspective, background, and get a little more into the details of the subject.
Sure. Thank you, and good morning, commissioners. Tim Wilson.
And correct me if my history is wrong as well.
Your history is spot on. I can provide some additional background as to the why, if that would be helpful, and then the steps that we have taken to address the board's directive to further engage the advisory committees. And then I'm just going to read from some background information, so bear with me. The administrative rules for lake management districts were developed to provide clarity for petitioning and current LMDs and to minimize risks to the county as identified through lessons learned and determinations from the prosecuting attorney's office. This information has been shared with the petitioning communities at a virtual open house held on May 18th of 2022, so about 13 months ago. Topics covered in the LMD rules include advisory committee elections and management, meeting frequency, roles and responsibilities of Thurston County, roles and responsibility of the advisory committees, annual and long-range work plan development, the need for integrated aquatic vegetation management plans, and the conditions of the stormwater fee reduction. The LMDs were developed to provide consistency between the LMDs, understanding that at the time we had two communities that were petitioning for formation of the LMDs. The rules support staff and the communities in understanding what roles and responsibilities are. They provide alignment with both the BoCC and voter approved formation documents. So going back to the resolution of intention for Long Lake and Lake Lawrence that the board took action on and the voters ultimately voted on, have language specific to what a steering committee is. In our experience, 10 plus years that we can track readily has been that both the county and the communities have a different set of expectations as to what an LMD is. So this was an attempt to provide some clarity on that, following both the board adopted language and some weigh-ins from the prosecuting attorney's office over the years. In part, the admin rule document issues which have been discussed piecemeal with advisory committees for years, but continue to be an area of risk and difficulty for management of the committees. Identified areas where the county has struggled include consultant, contractor interference, untrained committee members making technical decisions, lack of alignment with county initiatives such as the integrated pest management policy, stormwater messaging, etc. Some issues with misinformation or lack of communication, potential Open Public Meeting Act issues, at times intimidation of staff, and lack of clear roles and responsibilities. The new LMDs, Pattison and Offutt, would be subject to the admin rules upon inception. The rules have been communicated and discussed with the petitioners, and the rules have been incorporated into the resolutions to provide clear expectations. For existing LMDs, the portions of the rules involving risk already apply, but to date have not been documented. For new provisions such as management of elections, the existing LMDs would not be subject to the rules until they renew their LMDs in 2026 and 2027 respectively. Both existing and proposed LMDs have and will continue to be given the opportunity to provide constructive feedback on the administrative rules for consideration. All feedback has been carefully considered and included in revisions of the LMD admin rules in instances where the recommendations align with the legal constraints of lake management districts. As mentioned, there is board adopted language both for Long and Lawrence that these proposed admin rules are consistent with. And we were very deliberate in putting language into the resolutions, ordinances, and board adopted documents for Pattison and Offutt to be consistent with each other and to provide clarity as they considered whether they wanted to engage with the county and join in this partnership. So that is some of the background on the admin rules. Some of the history and staff directives here. On November 22nd, the board was presented for consideration a revised version of the LMD admin rules, which incorporated feedback received from established and newly forming LMD communities. So this feedback was received post the virtual open houses that we had both for the onboarding LMDs, Offutt and Pattison, spring of last year. We also offered virtual open houses for Long Lake and Lake Lawrence at that point. At the board meeting of November 22nd, individual commissioners requested the following: that the LMD communities be met with to discuss the revisions. And two, the communities be informed that any further feedback should be grounded in the presented version and not consist of a rewrite of the document. On December 12th, staff hosted a 3-hour hybrid workshop with the communities. Representatives from all established and newly forming LMDs were in attendance. Prior to the meeting, joint comments on the LMD admin rules were received in writing from the communities. Any comments received from the communities were discussed in detail at the workshop.
Can you repeat the date of the workshop?
December 12th, 2022.
3-hour workshop with LMD
Yes.
regarding these rules.
Yes. And either in person or virtually, all 4 of the LMDs were in attendance. At that workshop, participants were advised staff would attempt to incorporate any feedback which provided a spirit of collaboration, clarity in roles and responsibilities, that the feedback was in alignment with board adopted policies, resolutions, and ordinances, that the feedback was in alignment with all past legal determinations regarding LMDs, and provided a level of risk mitigation for the county. The attached Word document that you have in front of you is the recommended final draft of the LMD admin rules, and is in track change mode, so revisions can be clearly viewed. While some of the suggested feedback received could not be incorporated, we believe the engagement of the communities and the incorporation of many of their comments meet the board's directives. For reference and transparency, we have also included a PDF of the feedback presented by the participants prior to the workshop. So hopefully that brings us back to the why of the admin rules and the last touch point with the board and how staff is trying to address those directives.
Okay, commissioners, we'll go ahead and start with questions. Commissioner Edwards.
Do we have? We've got a YouTube video or something that has been submitted on YouTube. It is available on YouTube. The lakes have their own YouTube address now. Are you up on that?
I'm familiar that Mr. Halverson created a YouTube channel and some messaging. I have not watched that.
Apparently they've got a couple thousand viewers now. And I believe that right now the county is not attempting to follow the RCW that creates these LMDs. I think the county is blatantly trying to force the LMDs out of business. And I am gonna actually, rather than us make a decision here today, I'm gonna call for my seatmates to set a executive session to talk about personnel issues on oversight of the lakes. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I am comfortable in making all of my statements in about our personnel that are overseeing this in a very public setting as like today. So that's kind of where I'm going, because I don't see that we've come anywhere near a solution at this point in time with hundreds of good citizens in Thurston County that are trying to do their absolute best in the spirit of the RCW that was put in place to help us manage clean water and fix our lakes. I can't, you'll never convince me these folks have got some kind of a conspiracy going against our staff and that they keep coming in and we hear contrary stories. And I would refer you to this memo of June 1st. And that came in from the from the lakes management people, several from different lakes apparently. Supposedly that's a representation of all of the lakes. So I would, we don't have to make that decision today. It's not a rush on it, but we need to do something about making some changes to encourage us to be working, us the county, to be working with the lake management folks to try and create the best water environment we can in this community. So rather than getting tied up in a lot of this and that, I think we need those lakes management people here to have a frank discussion on these issues if we're gonna move forward at this without having that executive session. But I'm asking for an executive session so that we can discuss the performance of personnel, including the county manager. So I mean, everybody from the top down. That's where I'm trying to go with this. So I don't know where my seatmates feel that needs to fit, but I think we're missing the boat on working with our community. So I can throw more in, Madam Chair, but I think I need to hear from my seatmates.
Commissioner Menzer, questions?
Madam Chair.
Okay. So then there's been a request from a commissioner. I don't have any questions for you, Tim, at this time. But there's been a request from a commissioner for an executive session to discuss personnel matters. Commissioner Menzer, how do you feel about that?
I don't support that request.
That is fine with me as well. County manager, how do we move forward on this?
The Director of Public Works, Jennifer Walker, had her hand up.
I just wanted to seek clarification, Commissioner Edwards, on the, what part of the RCW we may not be following.
The intent of the RCW, not the RCW itself.
Okay.
The intent of the RCW to work with communities to solve water quality problems.
Okay, so you have 3 thumbs up, county manager, in scheduling an executive session.
Uh,
My phone was down, Madam Chair. I said I do not support that request.
Oh, you do not support that request?
No, I don't.
Okay,
Edwards can say what he needs to say. But as far as the rules go, I personally have done everything I possibly could to work with the communities. I've had multiple multi-hour meetings with the leaders of Lawrence and Long. I've taken Mr. Halverson's redlined version of the draft rules, which he annotated and coded for me, and I went provision by provision to see and put on my hat of where can I just, every time I thought I could agree with the LMDs, I tried to do that. And there were 24, 9 of them have already been changed by staff, and this is from a previous draft. And now that I'm looking at the new draft, there's been even more changes to support the request of the LMDs, but I haven't looked at the new, haven't cross-referenced the new draft, but I'm doing it right now and I see there have been changes. But on the last draft, I came up with 15 remaining disputed provisions. About half of those, I could agree with the LMDs in part or in whole. About a quarter of them I could not. I have to support the draft as written, and there was about a quarter of them where I had questions. I just didn't have enough information to decide what I thought was right, and I have questions about those. So I've got them all laid out. I can go back to my office and write a draft of these rules that I could support and bring them back for a motion, or I don't know how to handle this when there's 3 commissioners and 24 disputed provisions. I know Commissioner Edwards is trying to keep it high level because it's really hard for the 3 of us to start wordsmithing. But, you know, I was really hopeful staff and the communities could reach consensus, but they haven't. So I'll write these rules if I have to. I want there to be rules. I think there's a valid basis for them. I don't want them to step on the communities that are doing the work. But unfortunately, we've just got a very detailed set of alternate provisions all through the document, and I don't quite know how to resolve them to get to a final version. But I'm willing to work on that at a longer work session if that's needed.
so Commissioner Menzer, you said you had specific questions about the rules. Can we address those questions today?
Sure. So there were 4
Perfect.
provisions that I really couldn't make a decision on because I didn't know where staff was coming from in the draft. One of those was, let's go down my list. Okay, under Section 3, steering committee meetings. Which now is at the top of page 2. I mean, essentially it was like, who takes notes and makes agendas? The LMD seemed to want the flexibility to say, if we want to do it, let us do it, and then don't charge us. And if we would rather have you do it, let us tell you to do it. And I just wasn't sure if what staff's response would be. Like, is that unworkable, or is that, it looks like the way you guys have come down on that is, you will jointly develop. So you incorporated the joint development of agendas, which I think is a change from previous draft, but you've still got notes will be taken and distributed by staff. So anyway, that's one where I just didn't know enough of the ins and outs of the dynamic of the staff relationship to know whether the LMD's request was reasonable or unreasonable.
Yeah, great question. We have added some language in there to provide more collaboration with a note at the end that said, if mutually agreed by staff and the committee, agenda development and note-taking distribution may be delegated to committee members. So in practice, both of our existing committees are doing that. They are driving the agenda to some degree. And to be honest with you, with one of the LMDs, we struggle to get a place on the agenda and to get our information shared. But we are certainly willing to compromise on that, as is the language here. Again, they are developing those agendas currently. They're also recording the notes for those. At times we struggle with that and have to provide some messaging back that says these are the committee's take on the conversation that was had, and they don't necessarily constitute the county's minutes, because there's information in there that we can't agree on that was actually said in the meetings, if that makes sense. But we are more than welcome to have them drive both the agendas and the note taking.
And I do see that last sentence is new. The last sentence that says, if mutually agreed, agenda development, note taking may be delegated.
Yeah, this was the last version that was submitted January to the board.
Okay, I apologize. I've just been working from my last sit down with
Sure.
Mr. Halverson and going through his questions, and it looks like staff has made some changes.
We have tried to incorporate language anywhere that we could that was not in disalignment with the prosecuting attorneys, deputy prosecuting attorneys' opinions on what an LMD is. So we felt a lot of the language was the mechanism for a special district. So a lot of the proposed language in which they had authority throughout was in disalignment with the board adopted resolutions for the two LMDs, and was more aligned with special districts.
Mr. Halverson said yesterday that the LMDs had no input. That was a quote, no input. And I just, when it comes to trying to navigate these personality conflicts and stuff, it's like, I have a previous draft that shows where he basically said 9 different things that had been changed to his satisfaction. I'm hearing about a 3-hour work session in December. I'm seeing even more changes in the new draft than even the ones where the 9 that he said. So for him to come to public comment and say no input, he loses credibility in my eyes.
Madam Chair.
Whether it's to his satisfaction or not.
Commissioner Edwards,
Say no input.
Oh, I thought,
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Menzer was done.
That's one.
Well,
I mean, got 3 more
I took
questions.
that comment yesterday that no input since December. That was,
We've been working on this for 1.5 years.
I know, but no input since December. I don't know if that's true or not, but we're 6 months past December.
All right, let's give them the benefit of doubt on that. And let me say, my second question area was under steering committee roles and responsibilities. There was a question about who would facilitate. They wanted the option to facilitate meetings. They wanted to, but not if they didn't want to. I don't know if that's been tweaked. It has been.
Meeting management.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, are you asking if they are facilitating meetings?
Well, I'm just asking, in the draft I was working for, it basically said, they wanted to add a provision that said that they facilitate all meetings unless they desire staff to perform this function. And I wasn't against that necessarily. I wanted to ask staff, what was your reaction to that? Or why wasn't that incorporated? Maybe it has been in your newest draft, but that was one that couldn't decide who had the right.
Yeah,
approach in that.
the language regarding meeting facilitation is actively engaged with county staff during steering committee meetings to provide input and information to assist the staff with shaping short and long-term programs and management strategies that are consistent with LMD goals.
Is that a change from current practice?
This is the version that was submitted last December. That is not a change from current practice in practice for both Long and Lake Lawrence. Committee members are facilitating those meetings. If that's your question.
And
Maybe I misunderstood your question. I'm sorry.
committee members are facilitating the meetings. So is there a problem with their proposal to say that the steering committee facilitates meetings unless steering committee desires staff to facilitate the meeting?
It's already incorporated in this version, exactly what you're stating.
That's their version.
This is their version.
Steering committee responsible facilitate all the steering committee meetings unless the steering committee desires the staff to perform those functions.
I'm not seeing this.
On the steering committee roles and responsibilities,
Yeah, which bullet?
on
It
the
was
strikeout version.
stricken, and we struck it just because it's more in alignment with managing a special use district versus a lake management.
Okay, let me go to the third one. The whole issue about the newsletter and the website, I couldn't figure out where that should land. They wanted the ability to create their own newsletter, use their fees to manage a website. I know there's sometimes kind of what you said about the minutes. Sometimes the county's not in alignment with information posted there, but is there a way to get that figured out? I mean, I know probably not, or you would have done it, but that one was one I just struggled with.
Yeah. Here's what I'll tell you. We engaged with the county's PIO on that, and we engaged with Public Works Communications subject matter expert on these and whether it was okay to support, to let them write their own messaging and then support that with public dollars, which these turn out to be public dollars.
Public dollars or LMD dollars?
They're public dollars that are generated through an assessment on the rate.
Yeah, so they're paying for it.
They are paying for it,
Okay.
not arguing.
Let's
there at
make
all.
that real clear, that it's not everyday tax dollars that are the rest of the county's paying. This is through their own generated funds.
Right.
They're asking to do something with their own
Yes.
generated. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
and if the directive on that is that it is okay to do that, then I don't have a beef with that, other than to let you know, we have struggled with some of the language that at times has promoted one commissioner over another in an election, and messaging like that we do not feel is appropriate. If the directive is that, you know, it's okay for them to spend that money in such a manner, then we'll take that directive.
Thank you. And then my fourth big question area was, there was a part at the end on work plan development where they didn't want to be like, if the county had to change the work plan because of a new state requirement or something such and such, they didn't want to have to they wanted that to be provided without charge to them. And this was one I don't remember us ever really talking about, and I didn't know where you landed on that or if their proposal was reasonable. This was right in the middle of the annual.
I apologize, I'm reading their language from their draft. These programs required by county, state, or federal standards or regulations will be paid for by the county, state, or federal agency provided to down on LMD lakes without charge.
And I guess the response to that would be if the board allocates and approves budget for that. I don't know what the predictability in knowing what that cost would be, but right? I mean,
Right. These are work plan elements to preserve water quality or meet state or federal standards or regulations. So from my understanding, and again, I haven't read their draft since January, when we submitted these, December, January. This appears to be adherence to state regulations. So we manage an aquatic plant and algae management permit that allows us to do the in-lake work there. That is an initiative of these communities. And so we don't have an option for not charging them for that.
The piece on the work plan development, they asked for county staff keeping track of actual ARS hours expended and report these hours on a quarterly basis. That one was one where I had a question.
Yeah, and that was addressed partially in our briefing on the staffing plan for the Healthy Lakes program a couple months ago. We have been in an agreement, if you will, since 2018 that the staffing for the LMDs be kept artificially low. So we are moving away from that in 2024 and charging for actual time spent. We are also, since the time of that briefing on the staffing plan, we are tracking actual hours in an Excel spreadsheet to better account for the actual hours that are spent until 2024. So I don't have a problem putting those.
So they could get those on a quarterly basis.
They can get those in a quarterly basis if they want the spreadsheet set forward. I don't know that that's appropriate for inclusion in the admin rules, to be honest with you, but
so we're trying to get that set up with our new, like it's not to have it in a spreadsheet.
The point will be moot in the 24 budget because we will be entering actual hours spent for each of the LMDs in the 24-25 budget. We talked about that at that personnel discussion.
Can they have access to that?
We can run reports. We can run reports now out of our system, but as Tim mentioned, they're they're artificial. So in 2024, when we are putting actual time in, they'll be able to provide monthly reports, which is what we do now. It's just not necessarily as reflective of the time.
Madam Chair.
they currently get CAMs.
Yeah.
I was gonna try and let Commissioner Menzer finish up on.
Those are my question areas, so go ahead, yeah.
Okay, but being we're talking about billing, I just want to point out that about 2 months ago, I had a discussion here with Robin about inappropriate billing that had been alleged by the lake management people. And she said, well, give me that information and I'll get to the bottom of that. That's been about 2 months ago. She got the information about 2 days after we had that discussion at this table. And there's been no follow-up action, nobody in touch with the lakes trying to clarify what happened during that billing process, although she did say it looks like some mistakes were made, but we have not had any more information on it. And I just don't see that we can scrub this today and come up with a solution to vote on. And I think a big piece of it does have to do with personnel conflicts. And I'll just let it go at that at this level. I'd rather discuss those in an executive session, but I can discuss them in the open. I have no problem. I'm trying to run a business here. On business.
We're not a business, sir. We are a government
I know.
agency.
Or we are, but we're trying to do the right thing. That's what we are trying to do, the right thing for the taxpayers. And that's why I'm asking for that executive session, but we can air our dirty laundry in public if you so desire. I have no problem with that.
Just as a compromise on that, I supported the county manager's suggestion to move the management of this over to CPED with a different set of staff team, and that was basically rejected. Yeah.
Well, I don't know who
Well,
rejected.
Barry and I have talked about how he sent an email saying, if you're gonna do that, I want all my other, he wanted all of his other demands met on the financial pieces, or else he was gonna see this as a breach of good faith and not, and it's like, well, no, this is not a leverage to get the other results you want. This is trying to work collaboratively in good faith to address what may be an issue, may not be an issue, but we'll spend the time, money, staffing and training to try to address that. But if you'd like, and it was not something that was
Right.
amenable. So it's not all about personality, because if it was, he would have jumped all over that and we would maybe be in a better place now.
Well, I guess I don't know enough about that particular issue to comment, so I don't recall any of that discussion that we had when we changed it one way or the other. My concern is that as we move forward, we're trying to solve a problem. We're trying to create the best environment for water quality. We're trying to follow the intent of the RCW. At least that's what I believe the RCW is asking for. And so we do have a problem here that there seems to be a history of lack of communication, maybe lack of follow through by county staff. I just used this most recent one that Robin was hot on getting that done. No action. Okay, now.
Yeah, I haven't heard back from that one.
It is in the queue for her to respond. She already has all that information. I think she could reach out.
She said several months to respond,
Yeah,
and the material was laid out perfectly clear. And she even said, well, something's not right, but not one thing back to the Lakes people.
So I will ask her to respond.
Well, okay, that's fine, but why do we as the county always seem to be dragging our feet in communications, interactions back and forth? I don't feel that we're responsive to the Lakes people. There's actually thousands of people that are going to be subjected to this information on a different format. And I don't know anything about tech. You all know I don't know anything about tech whatsoever, but apparently they do. They feel they're being slighted severely by the county. And I think that we are obligated to try to come up with a solution. And I don't think we can hash that out right here at this point in time and make every point. I think they need to have some participation in this, and apparently they've not had any participation since December. So 6 months.
May I speak to that?
Tim,
So,
can you just,
yeah, I would just respond to that by saying that staff was directed in late 2022 to engage the committees and to look for compromise where we could. We fully did that and submitted this latest revision to the board and communicated out to all communities that those were submitted to the board in late 2022. As a briefing was scheduled, or a conversation was scheduled on this that was postponed a couple times. So we have stopped working on these while the board considered the revisions. So there hasn't been, I don't think it would be within the directive of the board to, after we submitted those to the board, continue to work on them. So that would be my response to that. And then if I could just say, whenever, what I want to be careful of in any program that I administer and when I supervise any staff that is engaged with the program, if I have questions regarding statute and alignment with statute, I go to our prosecuting attorney's office and I try to get some input on that to make sure that we are managing that in alignment with the county legal team's direction and a previous board's direction. When you look at the resolution for our two existing advisory committees and the board direction for resolutions on the documents that have been asked by the board for Offutt and Pattison, we're consistent in the way that we're managing those. So I understand the question about lack of alignment with the RCWs. We've asked that question of the deputy prosecuting attorney's office, and absence of some direction there, we feel like we're managing appropriately.
So at the end of the day, the LMD program is an optional program. It is an optional program for the lakes to go into this program. I have been supportive of the LMDs. When Barry Halverson came and sat down with me and said, indirect funds, if we fix this, right, our relationship with the county will be better. I brought this motion out of cycle. And I remember I got, there was a lot of concerns because it was out of cycle, but I pushed that through for the county to cover the indirect costs. And then we did it at the end of the year through the budget amendment process or through the budget process that year, because it was on a one-year cycle. And after we did that, I saw the relationship get worse. And it was a commissioner's directive for staff to work on admin rules because it was getting out of hand. And we knew the first draft wasn't going to be right? But that was the whole purpose of it, for us to all work on it together. And you are correct. It didn't say, not since December have we not met with staff. It just said we have not. And it's that kind of messaging where you might grasp, but oh, he means till December. But everyone else who's watching, it's like that doesn't know. It's saying, oh, staff have just not met with the LMDs. When staff have met with the LMDs in December for 3 hours, I have taken multiple hours as well, trying to come up with something to really make this relationship work with the LMDs. I have met with the LMDs, with not just Long and Lawrence Lake, but also Pattison and Offutt Lake. I have gone through all the emails. I viewed that YouTube quite a couple of times, trying to take diligent notes on it and making sure that, whatever concerns the LMDs had, we were addressing them. But it's just, you can't keep going back and saying, well, it's staff's fault, staff has an agenda, when staff has been taking direction from the commissioners at the end of the day. Like that's the truth. And if we want to head a different direction, then we need to lay that out. I think we're trying to make it work where the county does not hold any liability, because that is the big thing on it, right? And the LMDs are clear that they don't want to pay more for an SUD because, of the liability that they would hold as well. And that has been made clear to me. They don't want to pay more. I mean, this is a benefit both to the LMDs, right? It's not just a benefit for the county, it's also a benefit for the LMDs. It's a benefit for the community. I get that. And I understand that they are paying additionally, but they're also getting a reduction in stormwater fees. Let's not forget that. And with stormwater fees, how it's distributed, that means everyone else in the county is paying for those reductions in fees. So we are trying to make things work for the LMDs to try to come to a middle ground. And I think it's gonna take both parties. I don't know what the fix of this is, but pointing fingers at each other, we're not gonna get anywhere. And that's why I thought the admin rules were a good idea. It would lay out the roles of what staff roles were, what the LMD's roles were very clearly, and instead it's turned into this just whole contentious issue. And that's why even before I sat down with both Addison and Offutt Lake and asked them very clearly about the admin roles and whether they were on board with them, and they both said yes. They both looked me in my eye and they both said that they supported the admin rules. And I was like, okay, well, then we can work on it with Lawrence and Long Lake, right? But then it's just turned again into a whole contentious issue where there's been a lot of finger pointing and there's, you know, saying that we don't care about water quality, that the commissioners don't care when we've made several investments for that. I mean, we're covering indirect funds from our general fund where we came in and, you know, did the lakes program where we like promoted like 2 other lakes that to come on board and covered any cost after $5,000. That was the initial cost. We've had multiple programs go into place to support water quality in the county. That just doesn't have to do with LMDs, period, but with other programs as well. And I'm extremely frustrated. And I will stop myself before I say something I shouldn't. Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
In reference to a couple of comments the chair made. As far as everybody pays because of the stormwater issue, the reduction. Also, everybody benefits. These are public lakes with public access. And they're an asset to everybody that lives in Thurston County.
But not everyone in Thurston County uses the lakes. I will just say that,
But
right?
they have an option.
Not everyone in Thurston County uses the lakes, and it's not, you know, well, and there's regattas of people who don't even live in Thurston County who come and use the lakes, right? But everyone in Thurston County is the main benefit is for the people who live nearby the lakes. And
I have to take difference with that. The regattas are a big piece of our economic engine for that day that event happens.
and I, you know, that's great. Like, I don't say anything against the regattas. They're great.
So I really do see that these are a jewel of our county. They are a big benefit if you count the individuals that come. I don't know that we've ever done that, but it's a venue that any citizen can utilize to their benefit if they so desire. It's there. They don't have to do it. Maybe some don't do it. That's okay, but it's there. It's one more thing, the same as our parks that are publicly funded. Everybody doesn't use the parks. So that doesn't bother me that they get a break on their stormwater. And as far as the liability issue, the lakes have never done one thing. This board has gotten misinformation from our staff saying that there was a liability problem from what the lakes people were going to do. They don't do anything. They talk about things. They're not out there dumping chemicals or doing anything of the like. We've got a miscommunication that develops for whatever reason. I don't know the answer to this between our staff and these lakes folks.
Didn't some of that come from prosecuting attorney's office? I saw emails where,
What?
I mean, just like the fact there's been this contention of like, There is no
10 items of liability.
There is
I'm gonna
no
refer
li-
to.
like, there was a
10
list of like
items of
ways in
liability.
which there could be liability concerns, and the lakes take the position that that's all garbage. There is no liability that could ever flow to the county from the activities of lake management districts. And I remember seeing emails where I believe, and so it's always staff, but I feel like it's prosecuting attorneys, information that I
I do
saw.
not recall.
Or you
that
got
they
it,
have
maybe
said
I'm
that.
wrong, I'm just asking.
No,
I think you got advice from Travis about what those liability issues might be.
There's general weigh in on liability, there were, and just structure of special districts versus lake management districts and the exposure, I guess, with the way they're being managed. And I should say, and I apologize, but this is not only my engagement with the deputy prosecuting attorney, it's my predecessors, so it's beyond Travis.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't need a prosecuting attorney to tell me that if you're putting I say massive, but if you're putting a layer of chemicals across the entirety of the lake, like Alum did and Black Lake, whatever. Of course, there's gonna be like, if it's not done right, it's gonna harm property and plants and animals, and there's definitely gonna be liability. So this is a very technical.
But who does that? The lakes people don't do any of that application. They have
Right, but if they
contractors
go
that
to
do
a
it.
contract, they objected to a provision here that said that they would go to a contractor and, have a conversation about that. And whether it happened or didn't happen in the
No,
past.
That did not happen. and
Okay,
I
but,
would
okay,
love to get
forget
that
about whether
straightened
it
out.
happened or didn't happen. Can we agree, my whole point was, can we agree that shouldn't happen in the future? What's the problem with just kind of laying that out? Maybe the new lake management districts don't know that.
Why base it on a past lie? Why base anything when you base a foundation on a past lie? You've got a problem. That's why I'm asking for the executive session so that we can hash this out, whether there's agendas from the top to the bottom. I don't know if those implementing policy that are coming from the county manager, maybe there's an individual agenda there. I don't know the answer to that. But I would like to openly discuss it and see if we need to take some action.
But
And
then
we've got
what's-
about 5 minutes left.
What's the purpose of the finger pointing? That's my whole
Well,
thing.
that's just
What's,
the bottom of it.
what's the purpose of it though? Besides just creating even more issues
Why?
We
Let's
need
change some
to
personnel.
move forward. And
Let's change personnel if the personnel are the problem. Let's just cut to the chase. Whether that means changing the county manager or going to the bottom echelon and changing it there. When we're trying to do the best thing, we have to make these tough decisions. And something is not working. And I think we are obligated to the taxpayers of this county to get to the bottom of it and do the best job we can. That's where I'm at. That's why I'm asking for the executive session.
we were going to do a change of the LMD to another department, right? And the LMDs objected to it. I mean, we
don't
were,
know
we
anything
were
about
going, we were going to change it. And it
Sure,
was so
I'll bring the email.
much.
I did inform that approach to you, Commissioner.
Well,
Can we discuss
I
it?
contact-
I'm missing the boat.
I'm not contacting Mr. Hubbardson and Mr. Carmen on that approach.
You did?
I phone calls
Oh,
individually.
okay. I don't know. That's
And they
fine.
came back and they didn't agree with that. And the board directed me to stop that process, including you.
Okay, well,
And
I
For me,
don't recall.
I'm-
that. I'm sorry.
if we're gonna keep digging up old stuff, if we're gonna keep just on this, then what's the point of moving forward? Because we're gonna be stuck here for the next 5 years.
Not if we make changes.
We need, no, because it will be the same thing. It doesn't matter who comes on board. It's still gonna be the same issues, right? And if there's not really a good sense of moving forward and really clearing things up and moving on in good faith, then what's the point? I mean,
The point is. to
this
solve the
isn't
problem.
good for water quality. This discussion here, what is it doing for water quality? It's not doing anything, right? All that time that the LMDs have sent, different emails to us has nothing to do with water quality. I mean, it's usually about like just
The end result will be a benefit. That's what we have to try to get to an end result that's beneficial to the taxpayers of Thurston County.
So,
I had some questions about, before you move forward, County Manager, I have some questions about, about charges to the LMDs, which I thought was, and it was on Mr. Halverson's YouTube video that I was actually curious about. And it was in regards to, which this I kind of agreed with. And again, I want to make it clear how things are charged to the LMD fund. It's not Tim that's coming up with this. These are already set. And if we want to see a change, that's up to the commissioners up here, the three of us, to make a change. But one of the things that Mr. Halverson brought up in his video was in regards to any time that, for example, commissioners give a directive, the admin rules, for example, that directive for staff to work on the admin rules for the LMDs, it was the commissioner's directive. And so I'm wondering how those things are charged. Are they charged to the LMDs, or are they charged? Because that was one of the concerns that came up, and I was actually genuinely curious, because I was like, well, and I agreed with him, like if it's a directive from the commissioner's office, like I don't, or if it's a commissioner requesting a meeting, right? I know I've met with you, Tim, on various occasions to discuss, you know, different LMD topics. How that is being charged, is it being charged to the LMDs? And if so, why, since it's a request from the commissioners and not an actual, not really having something to do directly with the LMDs, but more of a commissioner's directive?
I would say that when time is charged to those initiatives, currently it is charged to the LMDs. And it is, if it is a project or addressing a request by the board that affects all LMDs, and it is split appropriately across those. The board did allocate $10,000 to the Healthy Lakes program in 2022 and 2023. And then based on some discussions that the board had, that $10,000 was in large part to be reserved to support oncoming LMDs in their formation process. So we don't tap into that for these initiatives.
So what you're saying is you need funding, right? Whenever there's a commissioner's directive, right? Or a meeting with the commissioner to be able to address that and get. That
If
way
you
it's
don't
not
want it
charged.
included as a
don't-
part of just administering the LMDs, if you don't want that included.
And that I understand,
Public
right?
Works has restricted funds, and so there's not any other funding for us to be able to charge to that would be legal for us.
Okay, and that is something for me that I understand, and I understand, right, if it's the LMDs are being like, well, this wasn't, you know, this has nothing to do with
Our
our
work plan.
work plan, like, why are we being charged for this? I get that, and I'm willing to put some funding in that for Public Works, right? Because as, like I've said, I've had multiple meetings with Tim. I didn't know that this time was being charged to the LMDs, and so that's good to know, and that's something that I'm willing to put funding towards to. I didn't know when we took that funding with the Healthy Lakes program, right, that we were also limiting.
So we'd
you know,
probably want, I mean, that's also just a part of like professional development
Yeah,
for our staff as well. So, I mean,
Oh,
we could
correct.
certainly
Training.
put some type of proposal together. The board wants to keep those separate and say, okay, it's just for this work plan, but I mean, holistically, right? The cost of having an employee, part of that is leave, part of that is professional development for that employee. It's all of those things. So if we want to keep those separate and say, it's just gonna be specifically when the LMDs see the kind of the value add for the activities, we can put a budget together and
Well,
manage
that's
it
for
that
me
way.
when we
Yeah.
track time, right? For me, it's like,
We can probably have that conversation in the biennial budget.
yeah, I would
Make a
like to
point.
have this conversation because I saw that and it was like, well, I get that point from the LMDs, especially if it's something where they have no control over, where it's the board making a request for staff to do something in regards to that, and trying, like, being like, well, why are we being charged for something where it doesn't apply to our work plan? It's a directive from the board.
Maybe this afternoon on your budget priorities, you can highlight this, and we'll incorporate that as a proposal when you discuss this on the biennial budget. That would be my suggestion.
Great, and a proposal from staff would be great, because just seeing that breakdown would be really like, it would be good for us, I think. And then we can decide what specifically it is that, you know, we have the ability to fund.
Madam Chair, if I may. Going back to, I think one of the questions, how I'm reading the suggestions that came in are relative to the county, state, or federal mandated work. I think if I were to read in there kind of between the lines, is trying to suss out what would the county be doing anyway at county's expense if there were no LMD versus what an LMD is that would be additive as opposed to supplanting. I think that's kind of the question there, and if maybe that's where we could help provide some clarification.
Yeah, maybe we can work on that, separating that and bring a proposal to the board in the budget process. So I have two items for you before you close this meeting, Madam Chair. There's still outstanding the question of request of an executive session.
The request from a commissioner, and I want to honor that.
Okay, who would like to be involved in that executive session from the staff level?
Sure.
We need a referee. That's what you're kind of referring to,
No, who
right?
do you like from staff to participate on the executive session?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We need to, somebody has to oversee that we talk about the right topics. It's personnel, different things like that. I would say Rob. He's a brand new player coming in. Let Rob be the new referee.
Nobody else from the staff?
Nope,
Do you want no,
just
I
the
would-
three of us and Rob.
do you want no attorneys present?
Yeah, there could be an attorney there. That would be fine.
Yeah.
But I do say before we close, maybe as my final thing, my final statement. I really do feel that we should not be in the middle of this. I think we should give the county manager some direction and say, fix this. And if he doesn't fix it, then we take some action. And then we'd have somebody to blame. If he doesn't get it fixed, let's see what happens. Give him 2 months and see, and if he doesn't get it fixed, maybe he terminates someone or we terminate him. I don't care. We need to get it fixed. That's all I care about. And I'm trying to do this as politely as I can. I am often too frank. I make no bones about that.
But what is fixing?
So-
Because
A solution that works.
when I first started and I got told indirect funds would fix it, I went ahead and did that, right? Like, we took that commitment to cover those indirect funds, and that didn't fix it.
Well, I don't know about fixing it, but I don't think
That-
money is gonna fix this issue.
That was the conversation that I had with
Well,
Mr.
that might have been
Halverson.
financial. I'm not talking about any financial aspect. I'm saying we're missing the boat somewhere. Somebody's getting the wrong direction. Either county manager is misinterpreting where we come from. We're divided maybe about where we come from, where information is passed down from the county manager. Maybe that is interpreted differently. I don't know, but I'd leave it up to the county manager to fix it and let him work on it. But I still would like to have the executive session for a further conversation.
And Commissioner Edwards, respectfully, I disagree with you because I feel that direction, that clear direction shouldn't come from the county manager. It should come from the commissioners.
Oh, yeah, we ought to tell him what we want.
And as long as we don't provide that clear direction, then we're gonna keep ending up in the same
Okay.
place. So I put that responsibility not on staff, but I put that responsibility back on us because at the end of the day, we are the ones responsible.
That you are right, madam.
And so
You're right.
we need to come up with a clear direction and then pass it on to staff and say, this is the way that, we want to go, and
Let's come up with
Let's
that
come up-
direction after our executive session. How's that?
sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, it is.
I had one more item. Any additional steps on the admin rules as presented to you today?
I don't think we're prepared to make those decisions, but that's up to my seatmates.
I need to ask the question to the board,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, sir. You got my answer. I don't think we're there yet.
I like a lot of the new, I like the new proposal that staff has come forward. I think it's mixed a lot of the comments that we saw from the LMDs and their concerns.
Is there value to complete the crosswalk that Commissioner Menzer has
Yes.
done?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I could live with what the staff has drafted at this point, you know. Like I said, I put on the lens of like every possible place I thought I could, you know, side with the LMDs, tried to. An example is, that's still in there, they were insulted, I think is the word, by by the provision that said if they violate the rules, they can be removed or whatever. And that's still in there. And my personal opinion is, I mean, we have that authority anyway, so if putting it in there really, you know, makes them upset, like, I don't see that that's a big deal. I would be okay with removing that, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think we still retain that
Because
authority.
we're saying they're not prescriptive anyways, meaning.
Yeah,
if it
so I
doesn't say
mean, that's an
there,
example of where like I could go with the LMDs, like on that one, I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 more, and again, I didn't even go into, I mean, there was like 8 of them where I agreed with, or I could agree, let's just say. You know, I didn't go into that, I was kind of focusing on the ones where I was still hung up, so I just want the LMD folks to hear that, like a majority of the ones that were left, I could find, a couple of them I wordsmithed it, I didn't really like what they had, but with a little bit of wordsmithing, I came up with something I could live with that I think was, you know, helping move things in their direction, so. But I mean, it's just so hard with 3
yeah.
people and a complex document to get to a result.
Well, can we do this, right? With these new, because I have a lot of, we didn't really go down the admin rules breakdown in this meeting. But with our comments, right, because I have some comments too, but again, I feel the same way. I could live with these. Like, I think that staff has done a great job to try to integrate, but there are some things where I'm also like, I don't have any heartburn about this. That's absolutely fine with the LMD, what the LMDs have proposed. It's, you know. Can we send those comments over to Tim? And Tim, if you can kind of draft up a final version for us with all the commissioners' comments that can be sent out to the commissioners for one final review, and then, right, the rules can be sent from, commissioners agree on it, can be sent from the commissioners to the LMDs. That way it's not staff sending them out. It's the commissioners, and this is what the commissioners agreed on, right? It's not staff proposals, but this is commissioners have sent in their comments. This is what, you know, from hearing staff's perspective and hearing the LMD's perspective and the multiple documents that we have gotten. And, you know, this is kind of the middle road that we are taking.
So the proposal from Madam Chair is for you to review this version, provide comments, send it to Tim, and he will provide a new version of the.
What's
admin.
helpful is when, like.
I just want to
again,
prove that is
It
okay.
takes a little, and I hate to see it, it takes a little extra work on your part to make things manageable on our part, but like if you do everything Madam Chair just said, but like where there's a clear dispute among commissioners, just like lay that out, you know, here's two different permutations of this provision, and then we just vote.
Yeah.
And then we, you know, maybe we agree on a third of them, and we, you know, we have to vote on 8 or 10 of them, but there's like, you know, 2 options based on the input you get from the commissioners. I just want, and we could just go through them, because I mean, I think we just gotta get these done, and I don't, you know, I don't wanna go in.
Commissioner, do you agree
Are you
with that
agree
approach?
with that? Because we received, I mean, I've gone through all of the LMD proposals. I received the multiple emails with the different proposals, and so just with that in
Yeah.
mind, and
Could I ask to provide those comments to Tim in the next 2 weeks?
Yes.
is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay.
A very quick question on that. Is there any value for the board in having legal's engagement on that or no at this point? On the comments to see if they weigh in or
How
not?
about when we get done, we give it to them to review and see what they say?
Yeah, I don't wanna get too mired in, I think they've had, you know, I think things were still kind of tweaked in there.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
see them as being major evil. snafus.
So that's what I have. I will schedule an executive session for this coming Tuesday at the end of your agenda setting. Rob will be managing that on my behalf. And then I don't know if what type of attorney you need on that and what type of legal advice will you need on that. And then the commissioners will provide comments to the current version of the LMDs within 2 weeks. Tim will consolidate those comments, provide a new version. And within that version, if there is any difference between the comments that he received from each commissioner, that will be an opportunity for you to discuss among yourselves.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
who would normally sit in as an attorney on a labor issue?
I don't know. That's why I was like, do we need an attorney for this or is it like?
I can bring Maria, it's the HR director.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't care. I'm trying to work this out. That's what I'm trying to do.
we're adjourned, sorry.
Thank
you.